Hello, guys and girls. The program you are about to hear will be both fun and educational, but it is not a substitute for medical advice. Although we are doctors, we are not your doctors.
Hello and welcome to Travel Medicine. As always, I'm your friendly neighborhood internal medicine doc, Dr. J.
Hey all, this is Dr. Santhosh, your amazing pediatric infectious disease doc and researcher.
Infectious disease in the sky.
Uh,
I'd like to know. I'd like to find out why. Stay alive wearing a N95. Investigate. Ultramicroscopio.
yeah, I just found out that viruses because, the whole thing of finding out what viruses were in the 1930s and 20s and 30s were you took some snot, right, Josh? And then you knew, okay, all right, and now we've got this germ theory, right? There's a germ, and the germ goes into a person, and that's how disease transfers. But all of a sudden, you take that snot, you push it through a filter, which has very tiny pores, right, which bacteria can't get through. And then you have the filtered snot, and you put that into another human being, right? You just spray it in there, and that person gets sick. Oh my gosh, there must be an ultra microscopic thing that's causing the sickness. And they could have been called ultra microscopio. That's what they were called. But then someone came up with the term virus, and then we got stuck with virus.
Ultramicroscopio sounds like a Japanese anime or a single strain of something. Like, you know how a single piece of spaghetti is called a spaghetto?
Yeah, okay. yeah. Okay.
So I propose that we name a group is virus, but a single particle is an ultramicroscopio.
I love that. Yeah. Virus actually came from, it's actually an older word. It refers to poison or noxious liquids. So it was kind of co opted as this thing that we can't figure out now that we have germ theory, but we can't see this new tiny little thing. We'll call it that because maybe it's the liquid itself, but it turned out not to be. It was the ultramicroscopio.
So in the spirit of that fantastic fact,
Yeah.
Santosh, it is the beginning of the summer season. That
Oh
means
yeah.
very soon we will set off on our annual travels where we gather more stories
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
the next year. It
Yep.
also means that it's time to start packing some summer reading.
Ooh, yes, absolutely.
Now, I've been an avid reader ever since 1984 when Pizza Hut began a program that
oh, I thought you were.
that rewards you with calories for books read.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. You came in and you got a free personal pan pizza. That's right. Absolutely. I thought you were going to go with the Scholastic Book Club.
Oh, I did love those, but I liked it even more when someone's like, "Hey, nerd, all that reading you're doing, you know you can trade in those words for pizza?"
I think I was maybe 8 or 9 the very first time I discovered that you didn't actually have to read the things that you wrote down in there that you read. Um,
What?
if you just convince.
You were dishonest?
I mean, you couldn't because you had what I can't remember. It was like 5 or 6 books, right? You had to have on there before you filled out one piece of paper, right, or a card for a pizza. Like you couldn't be doing that daily. Like someone would get
You
suspicious.
couldn't be doing that daily.
All
Well,
right, Speed Racer, calm down.
I figured this week we could do our own little, instead of journal club, yay! We could
Ah!
do our summer book club, yay!
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm? So we
that
each brought a couple books to the table.
Yeah, and these are their suggestions as well as I do want to do some like reading and excerpts from the book that I'm going to share because I think that my author specifically and the passages he wrote are just beautiful.
We'll go over a couple of books that we have read or are looking forward to reading. And if you end up listening to any of those, let us know.
Yeah. Let us know what you think. Was it a good suggestion? Was it fun? Was it not fun? Was it informative? All the good stuff.
Santhosh, you have been just gushing over this book and partially the reason behind this episode. So why don't you start with yours first?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, Josh, let's take the Wayback Machine not too far way back. Just right around the start of the Second World War, or the precipice of the Second World War, 1935. We're going to meet a young man, a doctor, who is the son of two immigrants, and he's graduated from Columbia University. And this gentleman, Hans Zinsa, oh, can you get any more German than that? Come on right now. So he has gone through service in the United States Medical Corps, and he served in World War I. He's gotten a Distinguished Service Medal. And now he has gone through and he has studied this amazing new disease, not terribly new, well known, but misunderstood, typhus. Oh my gosh, the horrible louse-borne plague. And he has compiled as much information as he can on it. And he sits back and he says, you know what? I should not just write my, 200 plus medical articles and technical papers on this kind of a thing, but I'd like to write a book for the laity to understand what's going on with infectious diseases and then talk about typhus. And that's how we ended up with this 1935 treatise, Rats, Lice, and History. Now, this isn't the entire title. This title is actually the just a half of it. So the full title is Rats, Lice, and History, being a study in biography, which, after 12 preliminary chapters indispensable for the preparation of the lay reader, deals with the life history of typhus fever. That's the whole title. I absolutely love it. I think that I think between the two of us, in terms of writing prose, I think you're far more accomplished than I am. I actually love reading some of your, whether it's hip hop or, the kind of prose that you write and put into your amazing presentations, whether it be at Comic-Con or in the applied physiology course in medical school.
Well, thank you, Santhosh. And that brings me to, I guess, my first recommendation. Are you familiar with The Tale of the Dueling Neurosurgeons?
The Tale of the Dueling Neurosurgeons. I don't think so.
Author Sam Kean, a fantastic researcher and also podcaster, who writes in the sphere of some of our medical histories. And let's say, are you familiar with the children's tale of Humpty Dumpty?
I am. I actually do love Sam Kean. I have another book of his which I really love called The Icepick Surgeon.
First off, I'd like to point out, in the children's rhyme of Humpty Dumpty, at no point does it ever say, and yet we all assume Humpty Dumpty is an egg.
Well, yeah. He's often depicted as an egg, but I don't know if it's supposed to be a person. If it's a person, it's quite tragic because at the end of it, the person does not get put back together.
It's not just a person, Santhosh. That egg is a king. King Henry II of France and Lord Gabriel Montgomery, after jousting with Montgomery once, Henry demanded a second go, which, because he lost and he's a king and that's not what happens. So
Sure. That's not allowed.
And during the second joust, Henry was whacked square in the face by his opponent's jousting pole.
Ooh. Oh my gosh, ow.
So let us reach out to all the king's men, which
Okay.
include Ambrose Paré and Andreas Vesalius, both esteemed neurosurgeons.
Oh, Vesalius, that name I've definitely heard of.
Paré was the royal surgeon, and was a pioneer of medicine, and as such felt he could break all medical norms. Things that are painful, useless for the patient. He was a trailblazer.
Okay.
Vesalius was also a royal surgeon in a different court, but he was much more of our strict rule-following sitcom odd couple pairing.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
The two of them teamed up to see if they could revive this king who had fallen after taking a jousting lance to the face. Now, he had no fractures to his head, and so it would have been assumed that nothing was wrong, but these two knew better, and this was probably one of the earliest documented concussions we have.
So not the very first time a human had been concussed, but the first time someone bothered to write it down.
So you remember how all the king's horses and all the king's men, how's that rhyme end?
Could not put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Decided to autopsy the king's skull after his death.
No, what? That's not no, what?
Found his brain was in awful shape, yellow and putrefied, perhaps like an egg yolk,
Okay.
with pools of blackened fluid beneath the meninges, and this would set the stage for the fact that brain damage could be present despite no obvious fractures or surface wounds.
Oh, wow.
Now,
Okay.
author Kean goes through many of these medical stories from history, including sections on rewiring of the brain, facing the brain damage, laughing disease. Everyone is just like any of our delightful historical episodes, and several of them I was unaware of, and you know how much I'm always researching for new stories. So this was an absolute delight to read. The Tale of the Dueling Neurosurgeons.
Wow.
And now you know, Humpty Dumpty, French.
I do love it. I actually love how this kind of ties together because, of course, we're both reading medical histories. A lot of what Dr. Zinser highlights in Rats, Lice, and History covers the 1500s and going through periods of the Holy Roman Empire and the rise of this disease of typhus. I loved learning about the fact that typhus is relatively new in terms of human history. So if you find, for instance, poliomyelitis, you can go back to some of your favorite times in history, Josh, right? We see hieroglyphs of people walking with a cane and suffering from, a leg withered by polio. Tuberculosis is an ancient disease, but it seems like rickettsia and typhus are one of these where it likes to hop from animal to animal, and the rats being a reservoir, a lot like our friend Lhasa that we talked about a few episodes back. And if just the right circumstances come around, instead of entering, just the rat, louse, rat type of a cycle, it actually will break away and branch off and go into a flea and become, a little bit different. And, then it'll go through mice instead of rats. And we got this thing murine typhus, or what they actually used to call New World typhus, like Western typhus. But all the way through here, the kind of examination of history, of documentation, when we saw, diseases written down in history and documented and that kind of thing, and paging through it and going through, and then finally coming across something that that's the first thing I recognize as typhus. It was pretty recent, actually, according to Dr. Zinser. It was not in ancient times, but rather, like this in, maybe the 14 or 1500s. I'd like to, can I read a little tiny passage, which is one of my favorites?
Absolutely, but it has to be done in your audible voice. And I don't just mean, and I mean like a proper narrator.
All right, very good. I can't do because this is 1930s. I can't do that really cool 1930s accent.
What, the transatlantic accent?
That one, yeah, exactly. Like if you were a gangster, you'd go, "Mya," that one. But I can't do it very well. But I will do it. I will do it very, very clearly, as authoritatively as I can. All right. Rats, Lice, and History, Hans Zinser. Page 15. Swords and lances, arrows, machine guns, and even high explosives have had far less power over the fates of the nations than the typhus louse, the plague flea, and the yellow fever mosquito. Civilizations have retreated from the plasmodium of malaria, and armies have crumbled into rabbles under the onslaught of the cholera spirilla or of dysentery and the typhoid bacilli. Huge areas have been devastated by the trypanosome that travels on the wings of the tsetse fly, and generations have been harassed by the syphilis of a courtier. War and conquest and that herd existence, which is an accompaniment of what we call civilization, have merely set the stage for these more powerful agents of human tragedy. He goes on and on like this for quite a while. 12 chapters, in fact, getting into why infectious diseases is so important, specifically talking about how it had an impact during wars and battles. In fact, a much heavier impact than the actual weapons and the strategies. He has points in here where he calls the cute play of the generals a mere side note in light of the plagues which have decimated both sides of warring tribes. Basically just saying that, like, oh, you know what? You can plan all the wars you want. You can do all your strategy and your chess moves and, oh, you're so smart. But in the end, like, cholera will just wipe you out. Will just absolutely take you down. And coming past those 12 chapters, he finally comes through and talks about the first descriptions that he finds in the Orient, Turkey and kind of the Near East, and then seeing these descriptions of what could certainly be typhus in sailors' manuals, so going across the sea and coming back, and then in war journals, as well as doctors and medics that attended battles and were, kind of the field medics watching these poor soldiers die at the hands of these plagues, during these times. He almost saw this, these diseases as a way to actually end wars and stop them when they got too bad. Like, when a city was besieged and there was nothing to do, well, the plague would come along and just settle the whole matter for you.
So the next book, Santhosh, knowing that you are an infectious disease doc, I went to the trouble to actually curate a reading list for you, my friend. And all I
Ooh.
hear, because sometimes our listening audience may not want to go through a textbook, no matter how exciting. I know.
You're right. And I've got to say, the second book that I'm going to recommend today is even more dense and goes into biochemistry.
So let's take a quick break and make it a little bit lighter.
Yes, please do. Yes.
And here is a quick selection before we launch into the power broker.
Okay. Sure.
If you're looking for something with a mystery component, but also supernatural and medical, all words that naturally go together, then Strange Practice, a Greta Van Helsing novel by Vivian Shaw, is where I would have you start. In her consulting rooms, Dr. Helsing treats the undead for a host of ills: vocal strain in banshees, arthritis in barrow wights, bloodborne disease in vampires.
Whoa.
Until a sect of murderous monks emerges, killing human and undead Londoners alike. And then it turns into a little bit more of a standard mystery with her using her medical knowledge to solve. But I loved reading these clinic scenes of, like, the vampire telling her, just think of me as an overgrown mosquito with less of a vector capability.
Meaning that, the mosquitoes going around, yellow fever, dengue, malaria, just spreading diseases everywhere. Me, I just want a snack.
The next one falls a little bit more under the almost gothic romance or gothic mystery.
Okay.
That is the book Leech by Hiron Ennes. And this is leech in the sense of its old-time English term, which is another way to refer to physician.
Yeah, Hirudo.
In this one, the leech that they refer to is the physician in both a literal and a metaphorical way, meaning this parasitical creature has taken over all physicians. It's a hive mind, and doctors are from the institute, and they'll all of them are connected and all share knowledge, and
Hmm.
that's just taken as given when we begin this. So in an isolated chateau as far north as north goes, the baron's doctor has died. The doctor's replacement has a mystery to solve, discovering how the institute lost track of one of its many bodies.
Oh
for
dear.
hun- for hundreds of years, the institute has grown by taking root in young minds and shaping them into doctors, replacing every human practitioner of medicine. The Institute is here to help humanity, to cure and cut, to cradle and protect the species from the apocalyptic horrors their ancestors unleashed. So imagine if every physician you ever met was literally just one part of a giant amorphous blob monster, and then that monster had to send one of its tentacles off to solve the mystery of why it couldn't communicate with another one of its tentacles, and also standard like mansions, mines, whispered secrets, like an evil
Whoa.
Bridgerton.
Uh, that's so surreal. There's something like kind of Lovecraftian about that in terms of the hive mind, being controlled by all these tentacles kind of thing. That's a little creepy.
Now, the last one is by author Mira Grant, and it's called Parasite, appropriately.
Oh yeah, okay. This isn't the scary movie, is it? The one that won the was it the Oscar?
No, not the Korean one.
Okay. That
No,
one
this is
scared
about
me.
an actual parasite. So if the first
Oh, okay.
was supernatural medical drama and the
Mhm.
second was gothic inspired horror, this is more action thriller.
Okay.
And this one starts with a woman who was in a coma for years and years, kind of waking up. At the same time, a lot of other people who are walking around normally are falling into these kind of catatonic states. So here's the book jacket. We owe our good health to a humble parasite, a genetically engineered tapeworm developed by the pioneering Symbogen Corporation. When implanted, the intestinal bodyguard worm protects us from illness, boosts our immune system, and even secretes designer drugs. It's been successful beyond the scientist's wildest dreams. Now, years on, almost every human being has a Symbogen tapeworm living within them, which sounds like something that
Wha
could happen in our lifetimes.
uh sure, I mean, you're basically bioengineering like a separate immune system, it sounds like, and putting it in a person in a kind of a symbiotic relationship. I mean, I don't know if you saw the Futurama episode that was a little bit like this one.
Did
The
I see
brainworms that
the
came in.
parasite? So
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because the last line,
Okay.
but these parasites are getting restless. They want their own lives and will do anything to get them. Dun dun dun! Book one of the
Whoa.
trilogy.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So they've become sentient kind of a thing?
Well, if not sentient, then certainly they are no longer acting as intended. And you kind of follow the story of not quite zombie novel, um,
Okay.
but definite strong medical action thriller through the view of this one character who had one of these implants as a child, but doesn't seem to be subject to all the problems that the other implants are suffering from.
Oh, gotcha, gotcha. Okay. So some people are glitching.
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. So there you go, a custom built medical, infectious disease, and mystery reading list for you and our listeners at home.
Wow. So cool.
Now,
Okay.
your blood is racing, you're all pumped up, you got your light summer reading, you need to wind down with a glass of wine right before you fall asleep. Tell us the book that's going to knock us out.
So yeah, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Nick Lane, who is a professor of evolutionary biochemistry at University College London, and he's written a lot of books to help non-scientists understand the stuff that he studies, the origin of life, the very basic building blocks of biochemistry, and kind of how we came along. I am, I'd say, a good fifth of the way through this book. And essentially, Josh, what we're talking about here is yours and mine's favorite biochemical loop, the Krebs cycle. Yeah, no, I know. Stay with me though. He does a really beautiful job. He does a really beautiful job. For folks who have never studied cell biology or biochemistry, he kind of invites you in step by step in terms of understanding where we get our energy and how our cell works using proteins as tiny little machines, and how we convert food, essentially sugar, glucose, down to energy, and how that energy powers our bodies. But once he's kind of hooked you in, I'm not going to lie, it gets dense pretty quickly, Josh, because for those folks who are willing to go through this, he is actually going to draw out the Krebs cycle and then talk about acetyl-CoA and pyruvate and oxaloacetate and all of the 6 carbon and 5 carbon and 4 carbon and 3 carbon chains, but I think in a very step-by-step and gentle fashion. He's going to walk you through how Professor Krebs back in the day actually helped make this discovery of how energy kind of moves through the biological world, and then how it relates, at actually the reverse Krebs cycle, how it relates to plants, and eventually brings it all together to understand how this rather simple cycle, when you just look at it as a little ring of carbons that are one going into the other, how it links and unites all of life and where we come from, and how these simple biochemical reactions could have given rise to these complex organisms, including us, that we know today. So it really is very, very beautiful. It doesn't have the prose of Dr. Zinser, and there is quite a bit of heavy-duty chemistry in the middle of this book. But I have loved it. Actually loved listening to it as an audiobook, and I actually highly recommend that because, to be very fair to what you said, yes, if you listen to a soft British author narrating this book to you, it will lull you to sleep. And I think you'll have beautiful dreams about, cyclical biochemical reactions, and wake up feeling kind of smart and one with all of life.
You and I
really
had
do.
very different reactions to the Krebs cycle.
Yeah. If the Krebs cycle had been taught to me this way, I think I would have really liked it, because we learned it in such a dry, horrendous fashion without ever really understanding, like, fucking why. It's, we were just asked to just memorize these molecules and water and carbon and all this other kind of things. But the way that Nick Lane very lovingly describes the importance of the cycle, eventually giving rise to the almighty ATP. Of course, Josh, you can't read this book without learning that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So it's got all of those classics in there. It's really gorgeous. It is a love story to one of the most fundamental and amazing biochemical processes on the planet. So yeah, I do very much have a weird nerdy relationship to the Krebs cycle after reading Dr. Lane's book, Transformer, the deep chemistry of life and death.
So there you have it, folks. We've given you enough summer reading to earn at least one personal pan pizza.
Yeah. You know what stinks is if you read through Transformer, right? Or if you read Go Dog Go, like that's still one book.
Well, the way the program works now, it can also be number of pages or minutes spent
okay.
reading. It's designed for children, Santhosh.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed. Please let us know on Acast, on X, on Facebook, on Blue Sky, on any and all social media, which books, if any, you read, what you thought, and what you'd add to the list. We've got about a month and a half left until our big season finale and the inevitable comic book medicine. And we're researching that now. So get excited. Big things are afoot.
Man, I'm so I love every single time we get into our comic book medicine. Inevitably, you and I get into some sort of a tiff about how whatever the hell you dig up can't possibly happen. And you tell me to go soak my head and to believe in magic, you muggle. And I have to.
I'm just trying to point out that the world is full of whimsy and wonder.
I'm saying.
Okay? Is that okay with you, Scully?
I'm trying to get on board, but then it comes into the this thing of like, Josh, if someone offers to like meld an adamantium skeleton onto you, just like say no, and then you won't actually like tell me that you're going to say no.
I want to know if there's a healing factor that comes with that, because that's possible.
Yeah, it's not.
We already have children who are able to regrow fingertips. You can't tell me that full skeletons are that far behind. I'm just saying, look it up. Look it up. That's not what this episode is about. This episode is about fictional reading, or I guess not fictional. But
do you think like if like someone was browsing through and found part of this, that they would be like, oh my god, like Joe Rogan would just eat this stuff up if all of a sudden we get a phone call from one of the biggest podcasters going, hey, I hear you guys have a healing factor.
So that's it for this week. As always, we'd love to hear your comments, questions, and feedback. If you'd like to support us spiritually, emotionally, or financially, links to do that are in the show notes, along with links for the recommended books this week. It was a little bit research light, but that's okay, because next week we will be back with something as dense as one of Santosh's book recommendations.
Hey, man, it is some beautiful stuff, I'm telling you.
So until next time, as always, keep a song in your heart, soap on your hands, a shot in your arm, a spin on your globe, a book in your backpack, and when you've done all of those things, pick a place, pick a time, and happy travels.
Bye, everybody.